We're going to jump right in here. A little bit of smoke. I did say last week or for a couple weeks that we're not going to really see Signetti make media appearances until they come back in the spring. It wasn't necessarily a false statement. I did, I guess, mean from or through the school, but we did get an appearance with Greg McElroy on Always College Football. There were a couple different things Signetti said there. The thing that stuck out to me the most is what I wrote about last week for voiceofcollegefootball.com, vocfb.com. He stated that last year they moved the quarterback 0.25% of the time. If you know, obviously last year Curtis Rourke was the Indiana quarterback, tore his ACL in August, and nobody really knew. It was obvious he didn't really move much. It was funny. I threw on the Nebraska game, and I'll get to another takeaway from that in a second. And he was moving a little bit in there, but it wasn't really cutting. It wasn't side to side, and it wasn't designed. It was really straight up the middle. But less than 1% of the time to move the quarterback off the spot is actually insane. The fact that they had so much success in a college offense that predicates itself on that, like, you have to move the defense, and the best way to move the defense is to move the quarterback. And that just wasn't an element of Indiana's offensive attack at all last year. But to hear that number be so low was insane, because the things we've been hearing about Fernando Mendoza over and over again is the mobility he then uses to throw the ball with is really impressive. He talked about the offensive line, talked about it going 8 deep. This is something Brad and I have been talking about for a couple weeks on here. He said it's going to be better than last year. And if you think about the upgrades they made, you bring in Pat Coogan at center. You bring in Zen Mikowski at right tackle, who played not all the time, but did get playing time at Ohio State, especially in a Bob Bostad system where he seems to make guys better. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Indiana's offensive line gets better this year, and the freshmen or redshirt freshmen pushing that starting unit. A lot of really good players in that room, so it's something to be excited about. Again, he keeps raving about Mendoza. Really, really good player. The quote that was circulating around was, you have to have on-field success. The on-field success they had last year to get a guy like Fernando Mendoza. So it's just, I think at some point, if you got a candid, obviously all conversations with Sig are candid, but if you sat down and you asked Sig who's the most talented quarterback he's ever coached, I don't think he would hesitate. And I think it's Fernando Mendoza. So that is, like, for Hoosier fans, Hoosier football fans, like, I know season tickets were the seat raffle or whatever was going on with season tickets was this past week or this, like, yesterday or 2 days ago. Yeah, I'd be super pumped if I got season tickets, because this team's gonna be really exciting. They were number 2 in scoring offense last year, and like I said, they moved the quarterback off the spot 2.25% of the time. The other thing he said, and they asked him about how the current model of rev share is going to affect college football, and if he thought that Division II and Division III programs, or not even that, but just if college programs like Olympic sports could survive in this current model. And he said that a lot of people are going to be upset by this answer, especially in the Big Ten, but he thinks that D2 and D3 schools should get a cut of the rev share. And if that's what he's saying, that somebody who's coached at the Division II level has been up and down the spectrum of college football, like, it's hard pressed not to agree with them. So that was Sig on Always College Football with Greg McElroy. And obviously, anytime Sig talks to anybody, it's an awesome interview. So go check that out if you haven't. But like I said before, I was just, like, bored the other day. I tossed on the Nebraska, like, Big Ten Plus had, like, during the season, every Sunday they would post the full football games, right? So that would, like, go in and, like, watch the games after they played. Sometimes if I wasn't able to catch them live. So I went digging for the Nebraska game the other day just because I was bored. I was looking for it. I wasn't able to find the full game, but what I did find out is that game is now considered an Indiana Classics on Big Ten Network. So if anybody's a fan of scrolling through a cable on Big Ten Network, I agree, PK. Sig wouldn't compliment the line unless they're really, really good. But yeah, if you're a Big Ten Network guy, if you like scrolling through cable or YouTube TV or whatever, and you see Indiana Classics on there, like, the 2024 games are on there now. But in that game, I posted a clip of a ridiculous catch by Omar Cooper, which, like, I think one of my projects over the summer is just going to be making a map of America and, like, marking the college towns where Omar Cooper has mossed somebody, because the dude is just flat out ridiculous. Like, maybe he doesn't have the volume stats that a lot of these top receivers have, but in terms of body control, going up, contested catches, like, the dude is Omar Cooper is just ridiculous. Like, I joke that somebody's going to have to teach me to make TikTok edits, but, like, I think that's, like, what I'm going to figure out how to do. And if you just start seeing TikTok edits come out from my account, like, just know I figured it out. I'll get to this one in a second. But there was the other funny thing that happened this week was obviously everybody's favorite, least favorite, whoever you want to call it, Indiana commenter Dan Dockich made waves responding to another Indiana player making a TikTok. Obviously, not a big deal about a player making a TikTok, but he made some comment, and Omar Ballo came out of nowhere and just dunked through his face with the hashtag Toxic Dockich. It was absolutely hilarious. I had to actually check if that was Omar Cooper's account, or not Omar Cooper, Omar Ballo's account, and not like a fake account that responded like that. But that was absolutely hilarious. Did not see that one coming. And the Burner Army obviously got a huge kick out of that. And then the biggest football thing I kind of wanted to chew apart this week with Brad, but I honestly just don't have the energy to battle I'll call it stupidity because that's what it is. Obviously, this is Indiana Hoosiers Live at the Voice of College Football. I'm a huge fan of the Voice of College Football Network. I love the content they put out, love the people associated with it. They put out a graphic a couple of days ago listing the top 10 teams in the Big Ten, and Indiana wasn't in the top 10. Like, it's just laughable at this point. If you're just going to look at strictly the Big Ten and not have this team in the top 10, it just tells me you're not paying attention. Like, we're talking about this team as pushing on the top 12 of the country with the opportunity to make some real noise and make some real statements, and to look at what's going on in Bloomington, look at the landscape of the Big Ten, and especially what happened last year, and say this isn't a top 10 team in the Big Ten is just crazy. And it goes back to a point I made last week, and there was a Notre Dame fan actually that pointed this out in the comments, so shout out to that guy. But too many people are taking Indiana's football history, which is an awful football history, and projecting that towards what they're going to be this year. The people calling 2024 a fluke are saying a couple of things. One, that the coaching just wasn't good, or the coaching isn't there anymore. That's not true. They retained every single coach but Tino Sinceri. They're saying that the talent wasn't good, or the talent wasn't there anymore. And I've seen a lot of people call the players from last year's team mercenaries, people associated with Indiana, people not associated with Indiana. And I just don't love the term, because I feel like they gelled so well as a team and they represented the university in such a way that they really weren't mercenaries, but they really just were a part of the fabric of this program. It's just, if you look at the way Signetti builds his teams, if you look at the moves they made in the transfer portal, obviously we've been gushing about Mendoza for months and we're going to continue to do it. It's just, you're not paying attention to college football if you're not ranking this Indiana team accordingly. And too many people are looking at Indiana's history and saying we can write them off because last year was an anomaly, when in fact they should be looking at Curt Signetti's history. And Curt Signetti's history says he wins everywhere he goes and he wins consistently. And you showed he had the ability to show a blueprint for what his system and what his program looks like, and it produced a college football playoff team. Like, maybe the general public doesn't see it, but even like they were number 17 in an ESPN ranking that came out last week. So it's not like they're being completely disrespected by the numbers, but like, while the general public doesn't see it, like the recruiting like motion they have is ridiculous. Like, the people who cover recruiting, the national pundits that are like say the right things when they talk about the players who are leaving Indiana. And it's just, again, like, you're not paying attention if you're not ranking this team accordingly. Then the major thing that I mentioned last week, I didn't really get into it. Major story in college football that we really haven't seen how it's going to shake out yet. 24/7 and On3 merged. They are now going to become one company. I believe through the month of May, they are operating as they were. So you're still obviously seeing all the content you were seeing from 24/7. You're seeing all the content you were seeing from On3. But what's going to happen moving forward is On3 is going to take essentially all of the college stuff. So that's going to be transfer portal and things like that, college recruiting, or however they said it was going to be broken down. And then 24/7 is going to take like the high school recruiting and that kind of stuff. My gut reaction to that, and I tweeted something along the lines of like, it's going to shrink the scope of influence in college football. And to an extent, that's true. You have these two companies essentially doing the same thing, competing. Now they're becoming one. So there's less voices in the space. But that being said, like, I can't sit here and say it wasn't confusing as hell watching the analysts from both sides like tweet about certain players and talk about certain players. And like, there was an offensive tackle who like just committed like last week or 2 weeks ago, and I swore that guy was going to be like getting ready to get drafted for how long he's been talked about. So having it's the information sorted in a way, knowing that going to On3 is going to be completely college based and going to 24/7 is going to be the more high school focused stuff, helps somebody who's looking for information. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But in terms of like college football media and like I love the business side of sports and the back end workings and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a story that I'm really interested to see how that shakes out. And then it's funny. So after Brad told me that he wasn't going to be available this week, I had kind of a loose plan to do a Darren DeVries deep dive and kind of break down coaching style and how the roster fits. And decided to go a different way for a couple of different reasons. But one of the main reasons being we are still waiting on roster news. There is potentially, not that I've seen a ton of smoke, but potentially they're looking to add somebody in the class of 25 even. Obviously, they're waiting on the waivers for Leland Goody. We'll get to that in a second. But just doing a skim basically of the Indiana roster, like I guess a kiddie pool dive. It's obviously not a Big Ten or a roster that we're used to seeing in terms of like two bigs and like dominant size. But man, they got a lot of really exciting players and creators on this roster. A lot of guys that can score with the ball in their hands, score without the ball in their hands. You're going to see a lot of shooting, like a high percentage of like threes being made. And yeah, I'm really excited for this upcoming basketball season. I don't know. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how much success they have, and I'll get to this in a second. But just like looking at the pieces they brought in, it's like I'm not too worried that they don't have a true 7-footer on the roster. I think that they're going to be able to maneuver around it.